Viewers of Entrepreneurship TV, welcome to today's show. As always, on the legal brief, we have got Chiedza Shoniwa. She's a corporate and or a commercial lawyer. She has been practicing for quite some time. She joins us again to talk about investment laws in Zimbabwe. Chiedza, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Chiedza, there's been a recent amendment, if I've used the right term, but there's been a change in terms of the investment law. We now have got Zimbabwe Investment Development Agents Act. What does that entail?
Excellent. So the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agencies Act came into effect, and effectively it repealed the Zimbabwe Investments Authorities Act. It also then repealed the Special Economic Zones Act and the Joint Ventures Act. So now you have one act that's now regulating special economic zones. It's also regulating joint ventures, the agreements and what flows from there. And it also regulates investment law. So now it encompasses the three different laws that were put out by the ZIDA Act. I'll just call it the ZIDA Act. Yes.
Thank you very much, Chiedza. Now, we may be having viewers across the world who may want to understand what is the main difference between the old repealed act and the new act.
Okay. The old repealed act, being the Zimbabwe Investment Authorities Act, only dealt with investment law, but it was in a fragmented nature, because if you were to deal with joint ventures, you have to now go to the Joint Ventures Act, and if you're going to be dealing with special economic zones, you have another act that applies. So rather than dealing with investment law in a fragmented nature, you now have this new act, the new legislation, that's now trying to have a coherence when you're going to be dealing with investment law, where you find everything that you need in one single act, rather than having to open several different acts to deal with investment. So that's the major difference, where this new act is all encompassing. Some call it a one-stop shop for investment law.
Chiedza, thank you very much for that. My last question within this first segment of our show is going now to focus on the economic special zones that you have talked about, the act. What does that talk about particularly?
Okay. Special economic zones, they exist to attract investment in a specific region of the country. So now you have the government giving incentives for those special economic zones as a way to attract investment. What I can say is where the special economic zones apply, you have the government giving fiscal or non-fiscal incentives for companies operating within special economic zones. For example, you can have companies that are operating outside the special economic zones. They end up having to pay tax, let's say corporate tax, 25%. But now when you come to companies or investments that are operating within the special economic zones, they are either exempt from paying tax, or they don't pay tax for the first 5 years. Or after the first 5 years, they then pay 15% corporate tax. It's a way to give an incentive for them to actually find it beneficial to invest in those areas of law, yes.
Our viewers across the globe, may you stay tuned. We're just going to go for a short break. When you come back, Chiedza is going to continue talking to us in terms of what more can we learn from the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agents Act.
Success for Tel 1 means success for businesses, government departments, and all our residential clients, bringing into play a digitally enabled society by 2023. Tel One offers superfast, affordable and dedicated internet services across the country over fiber, copper or satellite to meet the customer's needs, location and budget. All of this can be secured with virtual private networks. Cloud services and the data center allow you, our customers, to store, manage and disseminate all your data in a state-of-the-art private facility. Business talk has become more affordable with our voice over internet protocol. VoIP allows you to make voice calls using any broadband internet connection and has massive potential savings as a cheaper mode of communication, making business processes more efficient and profitable. The use of unified business communication for our corporate clients offers a competitive advantage by managing multiple tools such as phone, video conferencing, email, customer service, and more. Stay connected all the time and bring your business up to speed with Tel One. Tel One, bringing you together.
Our viewers across the globe, welcome back. We're now going to the second segment of our session where we have got a corporate and a commercial lawyer, Chiedza Shoniwa. She's discussing with us in terms of the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agents Act. Chiedza, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Chiedza, earlier on you have talked about the special economic zones. You have also talked about the difference between the repealed act and the new act. Now I would want you to focus on the Joint Ventures Act. What does that talk about? Okay.
Firstly, I just want to put it out there. The Joint Ventures Act now was repealed by the Zimbabwean Investment Development Agencies Act. So now the ZIDA Act is the one that's regulating joint ventures. But now if you're looking at joint ventures, what they're looking at, I want to put it simply so that the viewers can understand. You can have a joint venture in terms of mining. You can have a joint venture in the agricultural sector. It's an agreement between individuals or companies, entities, where they say we want to come together with our different strengths and we want to venture into a specific area. So it narrows down to what the parties are going to contribute, their obligations, and it also comes down to the issue of sharing the profits, what they should do in terms of what percentages and the timeline of whatever investment that they have or the venture that they have. So the Joint Ventures Act dealt solely with joint venture agreements and agreements that flow from joint ventures. But now you have the ZIDA Act, and it also regulates joint ventures as well.
Thank you very much, Chiedza, on that. Now I would want to focus on this act being a one-stop investment services center. How does it work and what are the advantages of consolidating this within one shop?
Okay. So now, previously, if you were to get into investment, you had several government departments that deal with investments that you had to visit. And they're in different areas, geographically speaking. They're in different areas, and it was more fragmented. But now you have a coherent act, an act that now brings in together different governmental departments, the relevant departments, into one. Not specifically into one, but it brings them together. Now, when you're looking at the center that was established by the ZIDA Act, it is run by an agency. The agency comprises of several government departments. For example, you have the immigration, you have the revenue authority, you have the Ministry of Mines and Minerals, all coming in together to say if you have an investment that you have, rather than going to the different governmental departments to get authorization for a specific investment, you just go to the agency, you go to the center, and they deal with that at once. So it's at least time sensitive, so at least you don't have to spend a lot of time moving from one place to the next place, and it's now coherent. It's the same. You won't hear one department speaking about something else and the next department giving other requirements. it was made more to attract investors so that people don't have to go around hearing different requirements. They just go to the agents to the center and they get assistance.
Chiedza, my last question within this segment, I know it may sound a bit unfair, but I just want to make sure that there is clarity in terms of what we're talking about. Within the Act, there is talk on special economic zones. I want clarity in terms of this Act, does it apply to locals as well as foreigners, or it only applies to foreigners because we're talking of special economic zones?
No, the Act, it specifies that, you know what, we're talking about investors. You have local investors, you also have foreign investors. So it just depends on the type of investor you're going to be dealing with. But the Act encompasses for both local investors, because it also recognizes that you have local investors within the country, but you also have foreign investors. So the Act now gives reference to anyone now who can be taken to say, okay, you are an investor, whether be it you're a local investor or you're a foreign investor, you get to benefit from this single Act.
Thank you very much, Chiedza, for what we have discussed so far. To our viewers across the globe, we're just going to go for a very short, quick break. When we come back, we would have entered our third and final segment of the show. Our viewers across the globe, welcome back to the third and final segment of the show, where we're talking to Chiedza Shoniwa. She is a legal expert specializing in corporate and or commercial law. She's discussing with us and giving clarity in terms of the investment laws in Zimbabwe. I need to quickly put a disclaimer that Chiedza has agreed to come and talk to us. She's just giving us very bare rest minimum that she can provide. We are not consulting, but for those that may want to get more information, she is a practicing lawyer. You can always get in touch with her. Chiedza, welcome back to the third and final segment of our show.
Thank you so much.
Chiedza, for a lot of foreign investors, the issue has always been to do with the expatriation of dividends or profits. How does the new Act speak to this?
I can understand the concern that foreign investors obviously have regarding the issue of expatriation of profits. The new Act, the Zimbabwe Act, allows foreign investors to expatriate their profits in a free exchangeable currency. However, if there are any financial constraints, the government may temporarily restrict such transfers, but initially they're allowed to expatriate their profits.
Just as a follow-up question to that, Chiedza, a lot of investors, local and foreigners, would worry about the protection of their rights. How does this Act protect the individual investors' rights?
Okay. The Zimbabwe Act, it guarantees investors, local or foreign investors, to the access of law. They have access if they have a dispute that they have the access and the protection. So the Act guarantees that protection. And also the Act prohibits expropriation of investment. except in instances where it's for purposes of for a public benefit. However, that there are also exceptions to that. It's not a hard and fast rule, but expropriation is prohibited. But in the event that it happens, where it's necessary for purposes of public interest, then the proper channels or processes are followed to ensure that a person is compensated for the fair market value of that expropriation or for that investment which was expropriated. But the Act initially just prohibits expropriation, but also then guarantees to say in the event that it happens, there is always compensation that will happen, the fair market value. And it's not always that someone can just come and expropriate. It has to be for public interest. And also the exceptions in that the Act regulates what public interest it would be and those circumstances. So there at least there's a safeguard to say you can come, you can invest, and you have the protection of the law here in Zimbabwe.
Chiedza, thanks very much for what we have discussed now. For every investment and for every economic investment destination, in as much as people try to avoid disputes end up being inevitable. How does this particular Act make sure that disputes are resolved?
Okay, so we have the Act stipulates that the disputes will be resolved in terms of the Zimbabwean arbitration laws. However, if the parties then enter into an agreement to say that foreign arbitration will apply or international arbitration applies, then international arbitration then applies. So I believe now the Act is encouraging parties in investment circumstances to resolve their disputes through arbitration. But as I had indicated previously, where parties then enter into an agreement, they can choose and say, okay, fine, we want an arbitrator from Zimbabwe or from another different country, and whatever the parties have agreed on in terms of their investment agreement, then that flows in terms of the dispute resolution processes.
Chiedza, thank you very much for what we have shared today. To our viewers across the globe, we have been talking to Chiedza Shoniwa. She is a commercial lawyer. She's going to be appearing, talking to us weekly, discussing legal issues concerned with running of businesses and entrepreneurship. Once again, Chiedza, thank you very much for the time that we've had.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.